Deanna, you talked about my long-term goal, which is create 100,000 millionaires. How does that impact you specifically, the DeMarie Group, and what you do? Let's back up. What do you do for me? Let's do that.
What the DeMarie Group does for you, we actually, every facet of the DeMarie Group we do for you. We do your marketing, we do your interview requests, we market your podcast, we do your analytics for you. We even do some admin work for you. But every aspect of the DeMarie Group, your public relations, your marketing, as well as your analysis of things, of your company.
All right, let's open it up a little bit. What is public relations? And in 2 sentences or less, what's public relations?
You tell us what your narrative is, and we shape the minds of the public and tell them about your narrative.
Outstanding. So what is marketing then?
Marketing is us saying, okay, we've shaped the narrative, now come see about it.
2 good definitions. Marketing is getting attention. Narrative, PR is a tad bit differently. I think we can sum it up by saying marketing says, here's my cell phone. PR convinces you that if you have any other cell phone besides mine, you're a loser. There's 2 different things. If you've ever seen the movie Inception, which is a fantastic movie, marketing is, hey, there's an idea. PR is putting that idea in your head and making you think it is your own. And therefore, you don't resist the idea. You die for the idea. You protect it because it was your idea after all. But we know it wasn't. It was Deanna's idea. You just now believe it's yours, Antonio. You get it? Cool. That's the PR side. Now, I had you list what do you do for me, and you rambled them off. Good job. You did good. I'm going to highlight a few of those. You said interview requests. What does that mean?
What we do for you is we reach out to top podcasts. We submit requests to them to have you be interviewed on their shows. And we do this on a consistent basis because while some shows don't have guests that they interview on, other shows do, but because they're top-ranked podcasts that we're getting you on, their roster for the year may already be full. So we always go and double back and check back with them on top of reaching out to others. And then from those, once we speak with them, it's like, well, hey, do you know any other podcast that Antonio would be a great guest on? And then they would recommend someone that we would reach out to, or they would tell us, hey, they would do the introduction themselves and say, hey, such and such, this is Antonio, the gentleman I told you about that I interviewed. You should have him on your podcast, and you get more interviews that way. But ultimately, we get you onto top-ranked podcasts for interviews.
Fantastic answer. Now, that's the short-term goal you were talking about in this case. How does that fit? How do you then fit interview request into my long-term goal of 100,000 millionaires?
Well, that's part of the discovery phase. That's how we help build the discovery of you. It's getting you out to other audiences that may not know about you yet, or someone knows about you, but when they hear you on one of their favorite podcasts, they're even more prone to be like, you know what? He was just on the Gary Vee podcast. Let me go and see what he has. Oh, he has a book. Let me purchase his book. If he was on Gary Vee's podcast, I need to download his podcast. It helps with the discovery phase, therefore helping you get more audience members, therefore increasing the number of the 100,000 millionaires you want to create, because the more they know about you, the more they're drawn to you, And once they're in, they're now in every funnel that you have set up. So they're just continuously funneled through everything.
Fantastic. Is it safe to say that if I want to create 100,000 millionaires, I need to know more than 100,000 people?
Definitely. If you want to create 100,000 millionaires, you need to know 1 million people.
Is 1 million enough?
No, 1 million is not enough. I was just adding a zero to that, but no, 1 million is not enough. If you want to create 100,000 millionaires, you need to 10x that. So, okay, I'm not the math person.
It's 10 billion now, right? And we've proven, and that's bigger than that. But let me keep going, because you said a lot of fantastic things. Now, do I just need to know? It's more like 1 billion. I had to serve 1 billion people, ladies and gentlemen, to create 100,000 millionaires. Do I need to know 1 billion people? Is that enough? What's the what? Yeah, go ahead.
You don't know. You can't just know 1 billion people. You have to create 1 billion relationships.
Now, take all of that last thing you said, 1 billion relationships. Now, re-explain the interview request and what you do for me as far as why you would get me on all these podcasts in respect to I got to have 1 billion relationships.
Each of these podcasts have an audience of over hundreds of thousands of people. Once you're on a podcast, you pull in that audience, and now you're able to build relationships with their audiences as well as build relationships with the podcast hosts. And in building those relationships, you're able to build those 1 million relationships by word of mouth, by those who listen to the podcast and hear about you. Now they're going to go through the discovery phase and learn more about you. It's all about building the relationships. And the only way you can build 1 million, 1 billion relationships is to get out of obscurity.
How many people would you say? Let's make it 100 people per podcast, okay? Because right now we're just specifically talking about podcasts. Let's just make it every podcast, every major podcast has 100 people. It's just easier to do math now. How many people would you say would then hear me and then go, wow, that was nice, and then never reach out to me? Of 100, how many people would do that?
Of 100 people, you may have I'm rounding it up, but you may have like about 80%.
That's a good number. Now, I'm asking you the question again and see if your number changed. I'm just going to stress a few things. How many people are going to reach out from me talking and have a meaningful conversation and start a meaningful conversation with me? Is that number still 80 or does it go higher? How many people won't do it is what we're asking.
Yeah, how many people won't do that? You're looking at about maybe 90%.
That's very fair. Now, that's about right. Out of 100 people, only 10 people are going to reach out, add me on social media, check the show notes, and say, hey, I really, really appreciate what you said. Yeah, I mean, I hope everyone's listening because we're about to. She said a lot of great things. Now, Deanna, how does that tie into the long term? Well, the long term goal is create 100,000 millionaires. The short term goal is podcasts. Now, how does that now, at least in this case, we're talking about interview requests? What we're talking about ultimately, but you brought up podcasts. How does knowing that only 10% of those people that we reach I'm going to have meaningful conversations with, how does that now, in your own way, apply to the 100,000 millionaires? What does that make you do? How does it make you change? What tactics do you take now?
Well, first, I need everyone to understand just because we send the invitation or we send the request to these podcasts, 90% of the podcasts won't respond either.
Yeah.
So you literally have to double, triple, 10x the effort to even get to the 100 people of each podcast. And then from there, once you have the interview, to assist in getting all that information, we have to post the interview as well. Like, we can't just let it air where they are. We have to let it air where we are too, because for SEO purposes, when someone searches that particular podcast, or even if they search you or whatever, you're going to come up because now you're a part of that podcast. So we still need to, you have to 10x your efforts, because if only 10 people from each podcast are going to reach out to you, we need to increase that. So if 10 people reach out to you, then we need to post and market that particular interview on top of reaching out to multiple. There's over hundreds of thousands of podcasts. We need to reach out to all of them on a consistent basis. We need to post your podcast interviews on a consistent basis, because we need to keep it at the top of everybody's mind. It's if they don't, out of sight, out of mind. And then of those 10%, just because the other 90 people did not sign up or reach out to you, that's just the first time. You have your late people who, after listening to the same episode 2 to 3 times, they're like, okay, now let me go ahead and reach out. So we have to keep it at the forefront of their mind. We have to keep putting it out there. We have to keep letting them know, hey, don't forget about this. And every time we post it, SEO will bring it up on their end too. So if anyone else searches for them, it comes up as well.
No, it did answer my question. You brought up this chat isn't blowing up enough for my liking. You mentioned that both big and this time you introduced smaller podcasts. You didn't just keep it in the major podcasts. You introduced reaching out to people more than once, not just once. You introduced that there's sheer hundreds of thousands of podcasts, so I need to be going for a total sample size and not a small sample size. A total sample size of podcasts that are relevant to me and not a small sample size. You also mentioned creating some systems or a cycle of duplication to keep this going, and a few other things that escape my memory right now, but you had a lot of information in there for anyone to go back, listen to this, and go, okay, wow, that was pretty good. So good job there. Let's see. Then I should probably, if I want to create 100,000 millionaires, then the number, if only 10% of the people that I am going to reach are going to have meaningful conversations with me, and if conversations create clients, then I need to reach something like 4 billion people in order to have enough meaningful conversations to even get the people who qualify to become, who qualify in the desire of wanting to become millionaires with action. It's a whole different qualification. Did everybody understand what I just said? That in order to get to just the 100, well, let's say, we probably won't, not to put limitations or anything, but you're probably not going to bat 1,000. You're probably not going to find 100,000 people, and then all 100,000 people are going to become a millionaire all at the same time, all on the same day at the same second. That's just not the way nature works, because when you plant a seed, all the harvests don't ripe at the same time. I mean, that's fair, right? All the oranges aren't orange together. That would be very convenient, but that's just not the way nature works. So therefore, it's probably, Susan said, well said, it's probably safe to say that of the 100,000 people that I want to create millionaires, I need to have meaningful conversations with more than 100,000 people because everyone won't take the appropriate action or the season in their own lives. They won't reap. Can we only talk about this for the day? All right, let's just you had other stuff, but this is too much. This is too much. How do you? So let me pause real quick. Restate what we're talking about, just for comprehension.
So right now, what we're talking about is in setting your goals. What are you looking to do? How many people do you need to reach to hit your goal? Because I was telling everyone.
That's right. You're being smarter than me. I'm sorry. I forgot I asked a smart person. What I meant, I wrote it down. Just short-term and long-term goals. It's the simple answer I was looking for. Okay. But how they apply, she's about to give y'all the Antonio Scholar answer. How do they apply to the prime goal values, right? Because that's what you're talking about. Like, I've been writing down everything you said. Okay, the prime goal values, but this is the short-term, long-term goals and how they apply. Like, we're actually making them applicable and we're putting meat on them because people haven't processed that if I want to create 100,000 millionaires, I need to reach 4,000 people, 4 billion people. And I need to also understand 90% of them people are going to say, good job, and never, ever, ever say anything positive to me or anything to me. Boy, we're going to have to talk about that for a long time. Man, let me break. All right, stopping this section. We're so